My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to the AstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to all things lore content. Welcome to the IAE 2953 Lore Tours. Let's get you here. Some camera angles. Hello, welcome. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube now and after the fact, and those of you watching this on Twitch, welcome. We got everything set up. I was running a little late today because I was doing some other stuff and forgot that I had to reset up stuff. But welcome. We're going to be doing the floor tour for Crusader and Tumbril today. And then tomorrow we'll be doing Origin, and then the day after that, I think I'm just going to combine Drake and the other manufacturers together. So, I mean, a nice one big kind of go. So, with that, let's get to the floor and get started. I got to pull up some of my notes so we can get ready. Oop, that's the wrong one. That is everything. All right. So, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. I'm going to disband the party right now so we don't have the markers in here. There we go. So these are all folks in game who are going to watch us kind of go through this. As always, we go through the history of the manufacturers on the floor, and then the history of the ships individually. So let me pull up my notes here, just for specific dates. Okay. And then all right. So let's start with the oldest of the companies that are here on the floor for Crusader and Tumbril Day, which is Tumbril Land Systems. This was founded in 2536, before the First Tevarin War. It was incorporated on Saisei by two individuals who were both married. I'm trying to remember the actual names of them. Don't seem to have that in my notes. But we had two individuals. One was, oh yeah, we do, Kavaya Crosby and Aaron Dews. Kavaya Crosby was the daughter of two kind of blue-collar workers who worked for the University of Saisei. They specifically lived on a planet called Yar. Yar is the sister planet to Saisei, which is the third planet in the Centauri system, or maybe the second planet, and it is entirely a red desert. It had a bit of a kind of a mining boom earlier in its existence, but after the resources were stripped away, a lot of it was abandoned. So many of these old prospecting kind of habitations would eventually be turned into research outposts for a variety of different kind of universities studying various aspects of the planet. And Kavaya's parents were in charge of maintaining one of those. So she grew up on Yar with her parents, who were kind of mechanics, the caretakers. Then one day, Aaron Dews' mother, who was a professor, who was researching a specific type of plant and how hardy it grew in Yar's atmosphere, in its desert, arrived at the research station. Aaron Dews and Kavaya Crosby were about the same age. They're teenagers, and they grew a little close. And they spent their time kind of working together on this old land cruiser, which was called, or land cruiser, which was a old self-sealed kind of rover. They didn't make them anymore in the universe. But they spent a lot of time kind of maintaining it and getting close to one another. And then one day, his mom went out to go test some samples and never came back. And there was a sandstorm coming, so Kavaya's father, Kavaya, and Aaron jumped into the land cruiser and eventually found his mom unconscious, being sucked in by the sand, and saved her life. After that, they grew even closer to the point where they were dating. Aaron was a little older than Tavaya, so he went off to college first, but she's followed right after him. He specialized in marketing, and she specialized in engineering. They both got very good jobs in Saisei, but they got married, and they kind of felt unsatisfied. They were kind of young couple. They had pretty successful careers, but neither of them felt like enjoyed their lives. So when Kavaya's parents grew too sick and old to take care of the station, Kavaya went back to the station to kind of help them, not convalesce, but they kind of helped them out as they were, passing away. And after the fact, they ran into the old land cruiser that had brought them together. And they kind of had a discussion about it, and they realized what they really needed to do was have a project to work together. So they took Kavaya's parents' old job, and in the free time, worked on building their own land vehicle. In a time when there was no really land vehicles left. Land vehicles had been replaced by either trains or by spaceships. There was no reason really for doing overland travel with them. This eventually became what's known as the DX-20. The DX-20 was released in 2536. The name Tumbril actually came from it was an old two-wheeled cart that was like a kind of a trailer that they had to disassemble for parts for their new kind of vehicle. The DX-20 didn't do so well early on, but they believed in their product and continued to keep it on the market. Then a couple of years later, in 2541, when the First Tavaran War happened, the UAE military realized pretty quickly they needed a land vehicle to be able to do operations in kind of rugged area. They can do all they want in space, but they needed something on the ground. And there was nothing that was really suitable for the task except for the DX-20. So the military adopted the DX-20 and gave it the name that everyone knows it by, the Cyclone. This propelled them into success because every military kind of returning veteran loved the Cyclone and purchased one for themselves. And this launched a series of new vehicles until both of them would retire. Unfortunately, towards the end of the Mezer era, things got a little bad because they kind of broke off relations with Tumbril. So Tumbril lost a lot of its military contracts, so they tried to survive on their civilian contracts, but made a bunch of bad decisions, and eventually they had to shutter their doors in the 28th century. Luckily, a man by the name of... what was his name? Terence Naban, who was a massive Tumbril fan, because even though Tumbril was gone, people still had their own old Cyclones locked up in places and were like playing around with it. People still loved cars. And Terence Naban was no different. He had his own original Cyclones that he played around with when he was young. And so when he had a chance to purchase the rights to own Tumbril in the 30th century, he jumped at it. And in, let's see what it was. When was that? No date specifically, but I believe it was in the 2940s. He purchased the old IP for Tumbril and then brought it back. Because he was the head of a group called the DevCo Group, which would buy old properties and try to resurrect them if they can. And so he actually turned over all of his attention to Tumbril and relaunched the Cyclone to great success. Since then, they've made things like the Ranger, brought back the Nova and the the Storm. And I'm trying to think of the other ones that they have. I think that's it. So they've done very well, especially with the return or the Vanduul War. They became very popular. Now, Crusader is a completely different story because Crusader starts with a very young man named Augie Dunlow. August Dunlow was a kid growing up in I believe it was in Croshaw, in Angeli. His parents were pretty well off. He went to a decent school, and one day it was the school he went to did a trip, and they took all of the students to see the Imperator, who was arriving in Angeli to christen their latest work, which was this giant stadium, which was this huge work to try to kind of entertain the masses. This was one of the last Mezzer imperators, so they were sitting there waving their little blue UE flags as they drove by, and everyone was super happy and energetic. And then, unfortunately for everybody, as the car was driving to the stadium exploded. And inside the stadium was both his mother and his father, who were forced to be there by the local Mezzer authorities because they needed to bump up attendance, especially for the Imperator to show up. And then the resulting explosion caused chaos, and then many of the military switched sides. You see, the son and daughter of, I believe, Ulysses Mezzer, Fiona and Linton Mezzer, were worried that their father was squandering their inheritance. So they decided to pull a coup on him by training rebels to blow up the stadium, and then getting key military members to flip and then kill their father to take control. This killed his mother and grievously wounded his father. He was 10 at the time, by the way, just to give context. He did his best to try to work on his own to make enough money so he could get for his father's treatment, but eventually his father died because he was 10. So he ended up living on the streets until a group called Angeli's Angels picked him up and brought him to an orphanage where he was allowed to study and gain knowledge, and eventually went off to college to get a degree in business. Now, it's needless to say that young Augie Dunlow did not like the Mezzers because they kind of killed his family. So he became very active in anti-Mezzer movements while he was in college, and found out he was very charismatic and very good at talking to people and convincing them of the cause. He was so good, in fact, that he was scheduled to go on a ship to go meet with a bunch of other very secret underground rebels at a conference where they were going to coordinate their actions. But at the last minute, he got sick and couldn't make it. And then the shuttle he was supposed to be on suddenly exploded in atmosphere. Almost everyone knew that the Advocacy had caught on and were trying to assassinate him. The Advocacy at this time was very much a Mezzer secret police force. So in panic, they bundled him up with a smuggler, and they sent him off to go to Xi'an space, where he lived in Xi'an space as an exile until the Mezzer Revolution of 2792, when he came out of exile. And as he came out of exile, he helped coordinate the revolution because he was a pretty well-known guy. In the aftermath, he decided he was going to try to change things for the better and went off to participate in the new government, and found out that the only thing that could change the government and make things better was money, which he didn't have. So he decided to use his business background and buy a company specifically to be the change that he wanted to see. What he found out was a kind of a struggling small shuttle manufacturer called Seraphim Systems, which was owned by a very religious woman. And he convinced her eventually to let him purchase the company. And as kind of a compromise, because he didn't like the name Seraphim, but she wanted to keep it because, again, religion, he said, well, let's compromise on Crusader. So that's how Crusader Industries was born. From 2799 onwards, he led the company to great heights with the creation of things like the Hercules Starlifter, the Genesis Starliner, and many others. When he retired, several business-minded CEOs took over, but all of them were failures. They couldn't really capture the lightning in the bottle that he could. So after Keneal Yuder left, the surprise rise of an engineer, a designer, from the company named Kelly Kaplan was the one who took over. She was the one who's behind the Genesis project and making it such a success. She took over and immediately started to go to work. I think she took over in 2865. 2 years later, she negotiated the purchase of the low-mass gas giant Stanton II, which we now know as Crusader, and the city of Orison, which was at that time known as just a UAE military base. From there, she expanded the city of Orison and expanded the production line, including things like the Mercury Star Runner, the Spirit series, as well as the Ares, which all were very successful business-wise, which continued to increase her kind of prowess, which she is still the CEO of Crusader today. So that is kind of the background between both of these companies. And they actually have a very close working relationship with one another because they tend to do a lot of marketing together because the Nova can only be transported on the Hercules and many other kind of aspects of these sort of synergize together. So with that, let's look at the Hercules. Let's go. Which one is this? This is the C2, right? Let's go over, follow me over here. I'm just going to kind of do through all of the series, but this is a bit of a long one. Oh, this is the M2. This is perfect. This is the main one. So, meet the backbone of logistics of the UAE military, the M2 Hercules. So the M2 comes out from a study that happened in the mid-28th century, still under the Meser era, about 2750, where they were looking into what was causing so many problems, so many deaths in the First and Second Tevaran War. They were kind of doing a kind of an overview of what went wrong in the war and what they needed to do. And they found out pretty quickly that one of the biggest problems they were having is that all of the ships that they used to transport war material to the front were slow, vulnerable freighters, or they were these single-use drop pods, which could drop a ton of troops and supplies, but only once, and were very expensive. So they needed something that could not only drop troops, but also be able to redeploy troops very rapidly. So it needed to be able to survive landing in a hot zone and deploying, heavy vehicles and materials like Nova tanks and storms, as well as cyclones and the what would eventually become the Atlas platform, as well as troops and supplies if they need to. But also, if they did well and there was another place that needed help, they should be able to, bring them all back aboard and then redeploy back to another theater to be able to constantly jump around to different locations to help secure areas. This idea became kind of got swept under the rug because of the Meser revolutions, but eventually came back in the early 29th century, where they put together a proposal for this whole thing by forming what they call Starlift Command. Starlift Command is an interdepartment, intermilitary force group. It's a group of Marines, Navy, and Army personnel who all work together for this specific command, and their job is to kind of transport troops and supplies anywhere all over the galaxy at a moment's notice. They even have a Ready 5 group, which is designed to try to respond to any actions within 5 hours. So this formation needed a ship because they didn't have a ship to do all those things. So they got many proposals, one from I think Anvil, one from Aegis, and one from Crusader. The Anvil one I don't think wasn't very well liked. It might have been RSI, but the only two ones that were really taken seriously were Aegis and Crusader. Now, at the time, the Navy didn't think that Crusader was going to do anything but modify their already semi-popular Saturn Starliner for military purposes. And they thought that Aegis might do a bespoke ship because Aegis is, was still kind of in the dog pen. If you watched my previous episode, they were still kind of in the dog pen for what they did with the Mesers. But, what they needed is what they needed. So they weren't interested in Aegis, but they also knew that Aegis might actually build them the thing they need. Turns out Aegis tried to convert one of their old freighters into this device, which wasn't what they needed. And Crusader built a standalone, brand new ship, which they called the Hercules. So the Hercules was chosen and was rigorously tested, and became a favorite for not only pilots to fly, but for crews to be deployed on, and even maintenance crews. Because if you come over here, come on inside. This entire cargo bay here is a through and through. And right above it, you will see, if you went up to the top, you would see lots of different areas which are easily accessible for maintenance personnel. It became very easy to service most of these ships because you could easy access to them and replace almost everything on the ship in record time. Everything was built with these sorts of panelized designs, so it's easy to kind of separate them out if they needed to. It was a dream for most engineers who at the time were working with Aegis technology, which was very complicated and old. And so it became very popular, and it was used all throughout the military and civilian markets for heavy lift cargo transport. Now, in the 2930s and beyond, they decided to apply a specific technique, which was developed by Kelly Kaplan, the current CEO of Crusader, called the roll and go technique, which allowed them to produce stuff that was specifically for like specialized ships, to be able to make a bunch of other variants of the Crusader, of the M2. So come on over here and we'll kind of show you about some of these, starting with the C2. Row, thank you, instead of through and through. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but the C2 is the civilian cargo variant. The difference between the M2 and the C2 is the C2 loses a lot more of its armor, of the M2's armor, but it increases the number of amount of cargo it can actually hold. So it doesn't have nearly as many guns or as many protections, but it is a pure civilian hauler. It's very popular with a lot of civilians, especially because it can carry large vehicles. With that, let's move over here to the other one that a lot of people understand, the A2. A lot of people love the A2. So the A2 is a unique chassis compared to the other two, whereas the C2 is effectively a kind of a more civilianized version of the M2. The A2 is a kind of unique gunship variant. Back over here, these are Moab 12 size 10 bombs, developed by, I believe, Crusader. There are 4 or 5 of them on each one, on either side. They drop straight through those bays right there. It does reduce some of the cargo capacity, but it does allow for for you to drop bombs on targets, as well as it has additional guns throughout this, downward facing guns. So it's a rugged armored battle ship. it's a gunship. With that, let's look at some of the vehicles which are hauled by uniquely the Crusader line, the Tumbril, Nova, and Storm. So both of these vehicles have unique past. They're both built for the same war. The Nova and the Storm were built during the Second Tavaran War. Now, the Cyclone, which had become the darling of the First Tavaran War, was getting old, and so they needed to replace the Cyclone with a new vehicle for more punch, and they decided to create the Nova tank. The Nova tank was tested on the Battle of Korea Pass. The Korean Pass was a battle. I don't remember exactly what planet it was on, but it was a situation where I believe 3 Novas were on patrol in an area testing out recent fixes that they had done, maintenance they'd done to the tank, their tanks. And they came through an area called Korean Pass and stumbled upon an entire strike group of Tavaran, which were assembling to raid the nearby city. So they backed themselves into a corner and fought for several hours, almost an entire day, and were eventually relieved from the fight, but were able to hold for that entire time. I believe losing only one tank out of the entire force. That battle made these vehicles legendary for their toughness, their reliability, and their ability to bring crews home, but also to dish out a lot of firepower. On the front there is the replacement to the original cannon. That is I believe, Slayer size 5 Hurston Dynamics gun. It is built specifically by Hurston Dynamics to it's much more impressive than any size, any other kind of size 5 that exists. It's incredibly powerful for what its size is. On the other sides, we have its smaller cousins. These are the Storms. The Storm over here is the original version, with the IAE being an original add-on. This was built around the same time in the 26... Beer? 2606. There we go. This is built as a mini tank to support forward operations. It was used for scouting, as well as to kind of probe ahead of the novas to find the enemies, and then disengage and let the novas come up and kind of battle them out in front. And over here we have the Storm AA, which is built as kind of a anti-aircraft / artillery version of the Storm. And the uniqueness of the Storm is that it's all single-seater. So it's a single-seater vehicle, rather than the Nova, which requires 3 different crew to operate. So it makes it a little bit less crew heavy for these. Now, it's important to note that the Battle of Korean Pass was used specifically, with the Nova, was used specifically as the example that would lead to the creation of the Hercules. So that is one of the reasons why you see Tumbril and Crusader often advertise together and do other things together like this, because they are the reason why each other exists in many ways for today. With that, let's move on to, I'm going to double check, but I don't think there's any kind of side halls. There might be side halls. Let's go double check that real quickly, and then we'll go to, let's go to Apex Hall 4. Let's go to Apex Hall 4. I think that's one place. Follow me. Ah, we get the Starfighter. Okay. So, I wish we got in the Storm, but this works, or the Spirit, but this works. Let's go over here and talk about the Starfighter Ion. So, the Ares. So, the history of the Ares is actually connected directly to the history of the Spirit. The Spirit series was inspired by Kelly Kaplan, current CEO of Crusader Industries, and one of the original Spirit designs was called the Spirit Starfighter. The Spirit Starfighter was going to be the third design after the executive and the cargo variant. The problem was that they wanted to put a gigantic gun on the thing. Now, it's not clear, but it could be that at this time, Bering was still looking for its own, for a company to help test and kind of build around their gigantic bespoke size 7 weapons, which are these right here. And it could be that the Spirit was just being used as that test ground. We don't know exactly when that happened, but we do know, see the actual name of this gun real quickly, because it's a new series that they were building. This is the Bering SF7. So the SF7 is a unique variant of the Bering laser and size 7 weapons, which are designed as anti-capital ship weapons. But eventually, the Starfighter variant of the Spirit was spun off to become the Ares platform. Now, this, as I said, is a joint cooperation between Bering, the makers of everything from washing machines and microwaves to assault rifles and railguns. They make a lot. This specific variant is the Ion, which comes with an SF-7E laser cannon. But it also comes with many missile pods and is designed with atmospheric flight somewhat in mind, but it's designed to take on larger, more stationary-ish targets with this giant laser cannon. The Inferno over here uses the ballistic version of the SF-7, which is called the SF-7B ballistic Gatling gun. They both use the same kind of basic principles, though this is ballistic and that's laser. And this is designed for more ground attack operations. So let's go over here to Project Quicksilver, aka the Star Runner. So the Star Runner has a unique experience behind it. So the Mercury Star Runner was built initially, very specifically, as a blockade runner. It's not exactly clear what it was originally built for, but it's suspected that it was built for the military originally, which is the reason why it has smuggler holes. It was designed to be able to break through an enemy's blockade and deliver supplies to any location needed. Also with its ability for data storage as well. It was designed as an info runner as well, but Project Quicksilver has the unique mandate because it's one of the first ships built under Kelly Kaplan's Crusader kind of tenure, and probably one of the newer ships that was produced since the Hercules was produced in the early 29th century, and same was the Genesis. This was produced in the late 29th century, probably around the 2880s, 2890s. This ship had a unique kind of way of advertising it. It was used to complete the Able Baker Challenge twice. It's one of the few ships that actually has the moniker of being able to complete the Able Baker Challenge twice. Now, the Able Baker Challenge is a binary, well, Able and Baker are a binary star system where the Able Baker Challenge, which is an underground race, changes every year. And each route takes it through different very hostile environments that are very different, from floating glacier-sized asteroid chunks in an atmosphere of one planet, to corrosive acidic atmosphere, to going straight between the two suns and experiencing the intense heat and radiation which they put out. It's designed as an endurance test. So any ship that's able to complete it once is impressive. Twice is insane, because again, it changes every year. The Star Runner was able to complete it twice, which is its main way of saying, hey, we are tough, we're rugged, we can do any challenges that need be. It's gone on to have a pretty successful career. There are some military Star Runners that exist, but probably the most famous or infamous one is known as the Belligerent Duck, which is owned by the notorious wanted outlaw of Alex Dugan and her co-pilot, Maz Halan. So, if you want to know a little bit more about them, there's actually a video called The Reunion, which talks a little bit about their stories. With that, let's move on to the next group.
I tell you, there's nothing like being at the IAE. This year's pretty good. Should have seen the last year, though. That was a show.
And of course, for all of this year's IAE, they have these mining operations and cargo operations. Are going to show off a little bit about how these professions work. I think so. Then we go downstairs. Yeah, that's right. All right. So here's 2 of the 3 Spirit series. The Spirit was built kind of as an interesting experiment. So the Spirit C1 and the Spirit A1 originally are derived from what's known as the Executive One. So in the late, and by 2890, Kelly Kaplan, who had overseen the beginning of Project Quicksilver with the Mercury Star Runner, the first major project that they had run in a long time, also had purchased the gas giant of Crusader and the city of Orison. She was getting burned out. She was losing her spark, the reason why she wanted to be in the industry in the first place, and was thinking about quitting. But before she did, she decided to try to change up her routine to try to get her spark back for the ship industry. And what she did was began to, at first, just kind of oversee various new proposals for various ships and upgrades, and comment on them based off of what she thought, getting back to her roots as an administrator and as a kind of an engineer and designer. But eventually that evolved into her using any moment between meetings to sketch out new ideas for ships. And one idea for a ship kept coming back to her, which was a long fuselage ship with very large V-shaped wings. While she had the idea of what she wanted, she couldn't perfect it. She was having trouble. So she turned to an engineer who was known as the Harbinger of Doom. I can't remember her name specifically, but she was an engineer from another company that was brought in to help production of and design of the Mercury Star Runner. But she was known as the Harbinger of Doom because she found her niche in Crusader by going around doomed projects and pointing out interesting technologies to save. So she had this knack for making the most out of bad projects. And so she had a lot of information about how many bad projects and like retired projects there were. Kelly Kaplan specifically chose her because she had heard about her experience and heard about her legend by looking through all of these latest suggestions that she had been doing. And in the process, she figured out this would be the perfect woman for the job because what she needed was a ship that already existed to build on top of. So her task was to build this ideal ship that Kelly Kaplan wanted, but with a twist. She had to use a fuselage from a shuttle that already existed from Crusader Industries, something that had, it's old, it's been in the warehouse, it was no longer being used. So she picked what's known as the Ascension shuttlecraft, one of the first shuttlecraft ever built by Seraphim Systems, before Aegis Dynamics ever took over and created Crusader Industries. So this is a very old space frame. From that, she developed what would be called the Executive One, which was became Kelly Kaplan's personal kind of ship that she would fly around Orison and whenever she needed to go on meetings outside of the Orison. It was seen all over the place. It was this black, very kind of stylish ship, much like what we see here. And she thought she loved the design. She thought maybe we could sell it. The problem was that the Ascension space frame was built out of these very, very resilient materials, which made it very expensive to produce. So that was originally discounted until the 2930s, when they were kind of in an economic slump at Crusader. Their sales weren't doing well, so they just tried to find ways of re-energizing their whole brand. And so the Ascension space frame, the Executive One, was on that idea of let's try to bring this to market. So she put together a team to try to copy the Executive One for one, her luxury spacecraft, and it failed. It failed epically. But the designers did think that they could take the same design and turn it into a cargo variant and a spacefighter variant. Though the spacefighter variant was having problems because its gigantic size 7 bespoke gun wasn't working with the original kind of mandate of making it modular. probably to fit in with the roll and go technique, which allowed for the ships of different variants to be produced on the exact same assembly lines. So while that didn't work, Kelly Kaplan did like the idea of building a starfighter, which eventually would become the project, which we know as the Ares starfighter. So the C1, which would eventually be called the C1, the cargo variant, got the green light. And while it was getting the green light, the designer of the cargo variant also went to Kelly Kaplan and said, I could probably also make a bomber out of this. Maybe not a starfighter, but a bomber using the C1 as a blueprint. But he said, I can only do this if we don't use this modularity idea. And so she accepted that fine, we'll just not do modularity. Let's just make these bespoke ships. So that became the C1 and the A1. But in the process of building all these ships, she asked them to update her Executive 1 interior to new designs and styles to kind of fit this new series of ships. And she liked the redo so much that she asked them to also do a bespoke Executive 1 clone, kind of its own, using the base model of the C1 and the A1. That kind of delayed production a little bit, but as a result, in last year, the Spirit series was announced with both the A1 and the C1 releasing this year. The C1 is the cargo variant. We can come in here and kind of show you the difference. All of them have enough living quarters for the crew. The C1 doesn't have a back turret. Instead, it has a telescoping tractor beam, which allows for loading and unloading of cargo, which holds up to 64 SCU of cargo. We come down here. We get the classic 2 mini Crusader doors. But inside, we see 2 beds. We see bathrooms and suit lockers, as well as the pilot seat itself. This is a little different from the A1, which is absolutely upgunned. It has 4 size 3 guns on it, and it also has 2 size 2 guns on the remote turret up top. But instead of the cargo bay, it's swapped out for these 10 size 5 bombs. And of course, the cockpit is pretty much the same. That's what you'd expect. These just went on sale this year. And it's still unknown if these were going to be super successful, but there is high hope for them. With this, let's go on down and look at some of the ground vehicles and the future vehicles that are being released by Crusader and Tumbril. Now, if you're enjoying this on YouTube after the fact, this is, if you really like it so far, if you think I've earned it, please hit that like button on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you want more content like this. I'll be doing this every day throughout the IAE. And can come join us live at 1 p.m. Central or 2 p.m. Eastern, where we get set up on twitch.tv/TheAstroPub. And the 2 p.m. is usually when we are, aka 3 p.m. Eastern, is when we're actually going to do the live stream for YouTube and such. So you're welcome to join us on the floor as well as kind of hang out live. I'd love to see you here. All right. So down here, we're going to get to see the meat and potatoes, the DX20. So the DX20 earned the Cyclone earned its stripes in the First Tavaran War. And specifically, the Cyclone was incredibly effective because the base DX20 did not have any guns. So they had to add guns to it. But they were very simple and easy to operate. The Cyclone became very popular because of what we know today as the AA variant of the Cyclone. This variant was used as a impromptu rocket artillery during the First Tavaran War, when a group of militia were caught unawares by a battalion of Tavaran tanks, which were approaching their position in a mountainous region. The artillery, the makeshift artillery spread out along the ridge and on the reverse slope and fired down at the approaching tanks. And then several, over here we have the TR and the MT versions of these two types of cyclones, sped down at the last moment to weave in between the Devarn tank columns and engage them at point-blank range. This combination was so effective, it won the battle for the UPE and made the name of the DX-20, aka the Cyclone, became the kind of poster child of the war. It's one of those things that really became the highlight of the war next to the Retaliator, which has earned its lovable title all throughout even today. Over here, I believe we just have the Cyclone base variant. We also have the RC. So this is the base variant, what it looks like. It's a 2-seater with a 1 SCU box in the back, I believe. It may be smaller than that. I think it's 1 SCU. So it does have some cargo capacity. The RC is the racing variant, which is pretty popular. And the RN is a recon variant with the ability to drop these sorts of remote sensors to increase area and possibly even do land claims in the future. So, all right, come with me, and we're going to look at some of the upcoming ships for Tumbril and Crusader. Let's go over here with the Ranger first. Here. All right. So the Tumbril Ranger, we don't know a lot about the history of this. I think it's one of the first ever new vehicles created by Tumbril. That's from the beginning. It is designed for remote operations. It is effectively the two-wheeled Cyclone, as it were. There are 3 different variants. There's the TR, which is the military variant. There's the RC, and then there's the... I can't remember the last version, but there's the cargo variant, the combat variant, and the racing variant. So with that, let's move on to the last one we're going to talk about, Crusader. Crusader Genesis Starliner. Now, the Genesis Starliner is probably one of the most important ships by Crusader because it is where Kelly Kaplan, who's the current CEO of Crusader, really got her start. She rose up through the ranks from an intern to being one of the lead designers on the team that built the Genesis Starliner. Now, this may seem weird that a Starliner, effectively a people mover, is super important for a company most known for its large cargo vehicles like the Hercules. Well, the Genesis Starliner is unique because it effectively cornered the market for all Starliners for generations. The idea was that with the introduction of the roll and go technique, which is likely the idea of Kelly Kaplan, they could build standard basic Starliners with its capacity for, I think it's like 100 seats, alongside custom designed Starliners, like luxury variants or variants that have for transport, for troop transport, or for racing transports. So a company that was, say, like Meridian Transit, whose job was to ferry people from point A to point B, could buy a fleet of generic Starliners and several bespoke variants of this at the same time, and Crusader could make them on the same assembly line. This meant that everything that Meridian Transit needed was logistically built into their ships. All of their ships would use the exact same parts no matter what. This absolutely destroyed the competition, meaning that Crusader went from being a minor kind of transport company to being one of the most well-regarded and well-known kind of Starliner companies in the UEE, which made them incredibly rich. Without the Starliner, we don't have Crusader today. Whereas the Hercules is important, especially for things like the for its kind of contribution to the military. The Starliner is the moneymaker. This thing makes Crusader absolute stupid amounts of money. As chat's pointing out, we own a planet, Rich. That's this ship right here. All right, let's come out here and we'll take some Q&A here from chat and from the folks right here. Thank you so much for joining us so far. When sitting down in my stance, let's go stand right here. All right. So, are there any questions that anybody has in chat or on streams? Or for either of the streams? Question. Do you think CIG will add second entrances to the spirits or the MSRs? Almost certainly for the MSR, probably not for the spirits. If New Babbage didn't lag so badly right now, I'd probably join you. I'm sorry, Alucard. Anybody here in local? If anybody here have a question, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer. If I can hear you. Is there lore on the Rangers? No. There are no lore on the Rangers, sadly. How did Tumbril solve the limited ammo issues on smaller crafts? Unknown. That is unknown. Question, will the Genesis be modular? Based off the original design ideas, it could be, but that is a question for the redesign when it actually gets to put into production, which is still not anytime soon. Questions. Genesis, when concepted, had different configs, VIPs, pleb, etc. Any idea on still in the cards? Same question. I think, yeah, fairly similar. Can you tell us about those big barges that fly around Orison? I believe they're called the Atlas barges. They may or may not have been built by the UAE, the UAE military, to move things between the platforms, but that we know for now that Crusader uses them to transport cargo between the platforms, especially for various production requirements. So. When and... Thanks, buddy. There we go. I'll do this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll stand here. We're having a lecture here. When did Tumbril choose ships? Why didn't Tumbril choose ships? Because the two founders were enamored by the vehicle that brought them together. It was the Land Cruiser that saved his life. I can't remember his mom's life, and it's the thing that made them a couple and eventually got them to be married. So you can think of Tumbril as like a way of them trying to spice up their relationship, as well as a way of saving their relationship after many years of kind of boredom. So it was just they had a passion for ground vehicles, and that's why they wanted to make them. And that's the Cyclone is literally their child in terms of their future kind of endeavors. It still sticks around today.
Who is the current boss of Crusader?
Kelly Kaplan. She's still the current CEO of Crusader. She is very old. She's in like her 90s or close to 100. Though humans do live a little bit longer in the Star Citizen universe. So they were motorheads, yeah, basically. Are Crusader A series really civilian, and why would CIG love it? The A series are not used by the military. So like the A1s and the A2 they're not used by the military as far as I know. The M2 is the main vehicle that's used by the military. The A1 is not. And the A is brand new, so. So Crusader was selected because it had lower gravity in the at the altitude that Orison is at, because that means the platforms have their own gravity, because walking them we experience 1G. Yes, the platforms definitely do have one. I believe that the atmosphere itself also has 1G. I think that's just either an oversight or requires some clarification of the lore. Question, do you think Tumbril will design for the newly emerging market of smaller armored vehicles, i.e. not needing a C2 to transport to apply force projection? Almost certainly, especially if they're newer vehicles. How much did UEC did the planets cost for the companies of Stanton? There's no direct number, but it's in the billions. In fact, I don't think the UAE would ever want to admit how much money, but it was hundreds of billions.
Is Crusader the main office, or just the development place?
It is both the main office and the development place for Crusader. What was another question? So Crusader was designed because it has lower gravity at altitude. Oh, someone's asking if it's 0G. No, Crusader is not 0G as far as we know. It's just lower gravity. So, like the moon. And it's at that altitude that it's at. I would have bought it. It would have been trillions, probably trillions. We don't have any kind of like actual numbers. It is an astronomical number of money that was purchased for it. If there's an A1 and an A2, does that mean there may be an A3? That's a pretty big ship if it's an A3, but who knows? So who knows? Also, Earth has crew has more mass than Earth, right? A bit, maybe a bit more, but it's a low mass gas giant, so it's not as massive as Jupiter. Wasn't also because they could terraform that level to be good for human life? No, it was naturally occurring for human life. It's the reason why the storm walls are there. So the upper atmospheres do have oxygen. I believe there was someone once told me that there's theoretically a low mass gas giants might be able to have an upper atmosphere of hydrogen and oxygen, similar for humans to be able for us to breathe. But it was a theory, more likely. I think that's where CIG is pulling it from, was that kind of idea. Any news on Leilani Addison? Last we heard, she was struggling to get any legislation passed because she was an outsider, and none of the three parties in the Senate wanted to work with her. The last thing she really did that was major was the release of the Ibrahim Sphere technology, so that it's now open source for everybody. Why aren't Tumbril making ships? Because they make vehicles. How do ships get delivered from stations when you can claim stuff? So claiming, the way it works in lore is what you're actually doing is claiming a insurance on a ship, and then you're actually it's actually traveling to the station from like a warehouse somewhere where all those ships are. But it's transported on whole seas or flown by the company itself. So like smaller ships will be loaded onto whole seas in specialized containers, and then they'll ship them over. They might be transported on, if they actually do, they never will, but in lore, they're called the Crusader Jupiter series, which are designed to carry ships as big as the C1 to market. It's pretty big. You could also think of, like, say, the Liberators might deliver some of them. A variety of ships would deliver some of these vehicles to market from where they're going. So if whole series can dock at Orison, does that mean Crusader can pump out ships at a faster rate than other manufacturers? In theory. There's still a lot of questions about the Crusader itself. I know the Crusader chose the gas giant because it's easier to make ships, but I don't see any shipyards or even capital ships in their portfolio. Are there more larger ships on the way? There was originally a massive ship, like I said, called the Jupiter, which was designed to carry shuttles to market, probably multiple shuttles to market. And we know that the Ascension shuttlecraft is the size of the C1. So these shuttlecraft are absolutely gigantic. And as a result, that ship is possibly a capital class, as it is. Yeah, they're stonewalling it right now. Will CIG reuse the Ares chassis for other ships other that are not the Starfighter? Hard to tell. Do you know of a collaboration between Anvil and Tumbril? Because the Storm fits perfectly in the Valkyrie, except for the broken collision on the entrance. Don't know right now. It could be. The Valkyrie is newer, so it could have been designed, but it's hard to tell.
What's the current beef that the Ninetales have with Crusader specifically, why they keep infiltrating the platforms?
We actually don't know. So Ninetales has a long history of being absolutely brutal to their in their operations. They're actually not from Crusader originally. They're from Terra. It was their first kind of show up. Their main hallmark is brutality. They're very good at being absolutely like murder is always the answer. Violence always is what they come with. Even if they don't have to, they will engage in violence. In 2945, they showed up in the ruins of what we now call Grimhex. It was controlled by squatters. Those squatters were either told to agree to Ninetales' demands or be thrown out an airlock. So many of them decided to agree. So it became the headquarters, main operations center for the Ninetales, though none of the people who live there will tell you it's true. They still claim it's not. And since then, they seem to have had a particular problem with Crusader. So. UE is based in the Sol system, right? Correct. Specifically, Earth, New York is the capital. New York City, North America. So if we see Sol in game, should be the highest security ship system in game? Yes, almost certainly. What's the difference between the Zeus and the Spirit? Why would CIG or why would RSI suddenly decide to make an identical ship, or is it that Crusader stole the idea? Well, the Zeus isn't a new idea; it's an old idea. The Zeus is one of the first ships that has ever been made by humanity. The best way I can tell it is that it's RSI doesn't really have any medium ships, so the Zeus kind of slots into that medium ship category, medium to large. Why does the UE cover our regen costs? Right now, it's not clear, but they just do. Eventually, they'll stop covering though, and that's when the game will switch over to you have to pay for your own insurance. Can you buy the rock in game with in-game money? And should you do if you do plenty of mining? I have many people renting it. I've seen people renting it. Yes, you can buy the rock with in-game money, I believe. And yeah, you should, especially if you have a cutlass. Those are a great combination. I think you can do the same with the C1 now, too. Do you think CIG will ever make player-owned Jupiter ships? No, people have talked about the Jupiter in the past, and John Crew hates the idea. So, no. Question, what's your favorite Crusader ship? Probably the E1 right now, even though it's not out yet. That or the Mercury. I do like the Mercury. Why hasn't Crusader dealt with Grimhex? Because they can't 100% point kind of like make Grimhex like they know what Grimhex is. They know Grimhex is a problem. But in dealing with Grimhex, the likelihood of insane amounts of civilian casualties will not look good for the company who prides themselves on like 80% of their profits going to charities. So they don't want to deal with them because of the likely massive civilian casualties that will be involved, as well as they don't really have a full understanding of how the station works. There's still many areas of the station which are not fully kind of secure. And it's not the only place that the Ninetales work out of. It's just one of the major point ones. Would you say RSI is more specialty, or more especially the Ursa is the main potential competitor for Tumbril? For sure. In fact, the Ursa is based off of the Rapid Response Vehicle, which is the RRV, which was a Marine armored vehicle used by the UAE Marines, specifically to be deployed on smaller ships. So, Rock is 172K at Lorville. Well, there you go. So RSI is kind of NASA. If NASA was a private company, yeah, they do have a lot of pull. You think the UAE would blast an asteroid apart? Would blast the asteroid apart? You would think, but the UAE is also not kind of keen on having massive amounts of civilian casualties. And even if they didn't go have massive amounts of civilian casualties, the cost in terms of money and lives to go through Grimhex and clear it out would be incredibly high, and then you'd have to stay there afterwards. Otherwise, they just come back. So it's a lose-lose situation. So we have Earth docks, Crusader docks. Where else would ships be assembled in the verse? Martian ships, Pluto ships, materials in the belt. There is an assembly plant on the surface of what's it called? Of Locke, Idris 4. That's where they build most of the Idris. It's where the Idris got its name. Then there's, I believe, MacArthur. The MacArthur Sky Docks is where they build a lot of larger ships, like the Bengal, and the Retribution was built there. I believe Javelins are built there as well. So there's many different assembly, kind of like shipyards in the verse around there. There's one in Magnus, which is where all of the Drake ships are built. And in Origin is built. All Origin ships are built in New Austin on Terra. All Anvil ships, or a lot of them, are built in Novus or Novo. No, it's Nova Kiev, which is on Terra as well. There's many different shipyards that exist in the verse. Pretty much every major manufacturing company that makes ships has a shipyard. I think there's even a manufacturing company in Castra, which is where Kruger's from. So. RSI is Robert's attempt to be Elon Musk. To a degree, yeah. Wait, did we terraform Crusader? It was just breathable. It was just breathable. How would you define the general degree of armor, weapons, and utility each manufacturer leans towards, and how does the Crusader lean in terms of armor and weapons or utility? So Crusader tends to be simple to maintenance and rugged, so it tends to probably be more armor based, less emphasis on weapons, though the weapons they do tend to be are just big weapons rather than kind of smaller weapons. But they mostly focus on like cargo, people, or other stuff. Are you doing Origin today, or I miss it? No, I'm doing Origin tomorrow, and then I'm going to be rolling Drake in with the other manufacturers on Wednesday. Robert says it is Chris Roberts that made it, right? Yes, the in-game version of Chris Roberts, who's different Chris Roberts. So, So why are these quasi-military ships in civilian hands? Seems like it's ripe for Rome-style disintegration of the Empire. Because it is ripe for Rome-style disintegration of the Empire. It's called the Militia Mobilization Initiative. Effectively, the UAE is flat broke, and they're fighting a war against the Vandul. But as a result, they can't police the inner systems. So the places where they have lots of pirate attacks and possibly the Vandul attacks. So as a compromise, they began to sell all of these military weapons and armor and equipment to the civilian populace. This is not the first time they've tried to do this. It's been going on for about 150 years with various degrees of success. Basically letting each individual system have its own degree of protection that it itself is responsible to maintain. So, and of course, the companies that make these vehicles are very keen on making more of these vehicles so that they can sell to make more money. So the UE is just kind of allowing that to happen. I think it'd be cool that if you buy these massive ships like the Aegis Javelin that they put in game, they have to queue up being built. On top of that, you can go to the shipyard and see them being built. That'd be kind of cool. So it would be safe to assume that there are more systems are added. There could be more manufacturers. It could be, but every manufacturer in game now does have a home system. So, have they ever said Star Citizen is from an alternate timeline? Like, do Star Wars and Star Trek exist in Star Citizen? Star Citizen history? No, I think so. I believe they do. The point of divergence between our timeline and Star Citizen is the founding of RSI in 2038. That's the first divergence point. Though technically, I guess you could go back and say the first divergence point is the death of the Hadesians, which is 38,000 years ago. So, all right, if there's no more questions in game, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to kind of take the time and kind of move off to the next one, but we'll be live again on this floor of IAE tomorrow. I'm going to move over to more just question and answer session here at on Twitch and YouTube. So thank you again. Are storm walls a natural creature from Crusader then? Yes, they are. They actually feed off of aeroplankton, which exists around Crusader. Why is there only one city on all the planets in Stanton? Because they've only been around for about 100 years. So, and most of these cities are designed specifically to be specifically for their manufacturer. Except for Area 18, which is a giant city planet, but the way that they got around that is they sublet plots to a bunch of different companies. So there's hundreds of companies that exist whose headquarters is ArtCorp. So. Crusaders makes ships that transport heavy cargo and ships that transport people. Do they have a ship that transports very heavy people? Yeah, it's called your mom. No, this is the Jupiter, I guess. UE broke, just sell more planets. Yeah. You get a warship, you get a warship, everyone gets a warship. Yeah. Question, is advocacy specific to Stanton? No, advocacy is the military or the police force branch of the government. They are a specific branch. Like the military is a specific branch, the police forces are a specific branch. At one point, they referenced that the police forces are also the judicial system, which they said there are UEE courts, which are separate, so they haven't really kind of clarified that. And then there's the Senate, which is kind of more of the internal kind of force. So you think of the Senate as the internal group that deals with kind of internal problems and infrastructure and such. The military as the external force that kind of deals with external threats, as well as light internal policing and kind of interplanetary issues. And the advocacy, which deals specifically with criminal issues. And on top of all of them is the elected position of Imperator, which lasts for 10 years. And the Imperator is in charge of technically all three branches, but and they kind of work as kind of the head of state. So Star Citizen exists in Star Citizen, very meta. Yeah, in theory. Star Citizen stretch goal, Origin 890 jump. The rumors are true. The 890 jump has a larger ship in the verse. It works. The Origin 890 jump is an interstellar super yacht with exquisite styling and an array of high-quality upgrade options. The Travel of Stars style with multiple decks, high visibility in windows, and small boat bay. Whether you're outfitting to explore new worlds or to take on a pleasure cruise through Terra, the 890 jump is the epitome of luxury class and refinement. No word tour. Okay, I don't know why you're telling me this, buddy. I don't know why that matters. They've changed the role of it multiple times. How do you, as a historian, look at CIG's decisions process? Which developed ship they make old, but just now got to Stanton Pyro, and which is new? So most of the older ships have been around for a while, and they've been in Stanton and Pyro for a while. In terms of the decision process, I think it really boils down to what the actual writers want to feel like. Like, for instance, the Perseus is a great example of an old ship that they wanted to make feel old, so it was going to be a different style, but they also wanted to make it kind of modernized. Whereas ships like the Zeus Mark II is a new ship that's based off of an older design that's kind of updated and modernized. So the reality is it's kind of mishmash. It's whatever the writers kind of designers decide. And they do often make, I think, mistakes. For instance, the Redeemer makes no sense in terms of its design, and the Storm doesn't make any sense in terms of it being developed at the same time as the Tumbril Nova. They don't make sense that they're built at the same time. They look nothing alike. And you think if the company was making one vehicle and another vehicle, they might make vehicle with the same parts so that they could share a logistics chain, especially in the middle of a war. But they don't. So it makes no fucking sense. So there are problems where CIG definitely falls down on the narrative, where the narrative just kind of falls through the cracks. A lot of the way that it is, the way that the game is perceived is the game has a big kind of overview. Like, everything's built as in big scale, like the big questions in terms of actions and who's in charge and those sorts of things. And those details get added in as they start adding in vehicles or gameplay, which will require that detail to be added in so they can kind of slot it into the current overarching narrative. And as a result, there are some situations which are going to seem, they have giant holes in them. But what's the difference between the UEE police force and the advocacy? The advocacy is the UEE police force. They're the same thing. I heard Stormwalls have valuable parts to be sold. What's the lore on Stormwall hunting? They don't actually have any valuable parts to be sold, and they're bad at eating because they're mostly just hydrogen. They're just mostly just hydrogen sacks, so they're incredibly light, and so they don't really have any valuable parts as far as I know. They're just a unique species that exists. I think originally advocacy was meant to be Judge Dredd style jury executioners to a degree, though I think they always meant to have them have judges. The advocacy agents were always, in my mind, meant to be more like Wild West marshals. So, like, there are obviously judges, maybe local judges and maybe some federal judges, but you're talking about a single advocacy agent controlling an entire system, which is known as the special agent in charge. That's very Wild West marshals kind of experience, rather than Judge Dredd. But the Senate was very wrinkly guy. Question. So we're talking rugged individuals defending the Empire from Vandal hordes when the government crumbles. Is that the philosophy behind Star Citizen? So the original concept of Star Citizen was, what if we had the basis set in the background of, like, Rome at the end of the Empire? So Sol its influence is crumbling. It's beset on all sides by Vandal forces. Terra is on ascendance. It has good relations with the Eastern Empire, aliens. And so these two sides are going to split at some point. So Rome being Sol and Terra being Byzantium, aka Constantinople. That's the idea, is that eventually the UEE will fall. It is not long for the world. Eventually, in the storyline of Star Citizen, the UEE will fall. Maybe even devolve into a civil war. It really depends on where they go with that. That was the original concept. Things have changed since that a little bit, but I do think that's still the basic core tenet. There's no lore for Stormwall hunting. Do you think CIG will update the Genesis or make a Mark II? I think they'll definitely update the Genesis because it hasn't even been released yet. Have you noticed how old art for Star Citizen looks less sci-fi than the new art style? Connie versus Mantis, for instance, the old 300i versus the modern version, etc. There's a lot more grime and oil spurts for the original version. Yeah, there was definitely a lot more kind of adherence to modernity in terms of like the design styles. So. Do Stormwolves have milk? Not a clue. Yes, the advocacy has been reformed. They are definitely not the same political police force that existed under the Measures. They're kind of like the FBI or the Marshal Services in the U.S. today. Rome at the End of the Empire. Sounds familiar. Glances at Elite, Battletech, Warhammer 40k, etc. It's terrible times for human civilizations. Are great places to put video games in because they allow for players to make big decisions or help involve in small events, which can lead to big, drastic consequences. There is not a single video game that I know of that's set into peaceful times. There's always some conflict going on. Be it a big company coming in to buy up land in the town that you just happen to inherit from your parents, inherit a farm from your parents, or galactic level threats. So. Then I have to ask your professional opinion again. Do you think CIG will reboot lore at the Star Citizen release, or to have sense, or will it constantly rewrite until it at least looks solid? I don't think they do. They don't really do a lot of rewrites. The one thing that CIG does a pretty good job of is they really focus on trying to nail down the. How do I put this? They really try to nail down the big picture, like I said, so they don't have to do a lot of erratas. The main errata issues that we have with, say like Pyro, was that this lore was written with a specific game in mind, which wasn't what we have today. So a lot of the planets are designed to be absolutely terrible, that no one wants to go to, that you don't bother with because you weren't originally going to land on planets. So not all of the systems, but a lot of the systems are going to have to go back and they're going to have to look at what systems have what, habitation and so on and so forth. I think Pyro was especially different because it's the second system in the game, and they really wanted to make it so that players could experience planets fully rather than just having a bunch of blasted rocks that have no value. But at the end, they didn't really modify Pyro all that much. All they did was make it so that some planets were mostly habitable, but the main theme of Pyro being kind of a lawless location with many different pirate gangs that are vying for control, that's always been the lore from the very beginning. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, finding it and kind of having its fall be related to its attempt at taming Pyro, that's always been the case. Large amounts of coronal mass ejections with like solar flares, that was always the case. It's just some of the aspects when it comes to the landing zone and those sorts of things. But they didn't really do a lot of details. It was, other than the description of the planets, almost everything was the same. So I don't think they're really going to have to go back and kind of completely redo it. I think that you'll definitely see modifications as it goes through, but like I don't see them redoing the UAE. I don't see them redoing like the Tavarin or the Jan or the Banu, any of those kind of alien races, the whole history of the UAE. I don't see them changing that much at all. I know some people brought up the idea that it shouldn't be set at the date it is. That's arbitrary. There's no reason why it has to be set at any date. It could be called, 242 CR in terms of dating system. It doesn't really matter as long as they have their own kind of example behind it. Starfield is kind of peaceful. Are you kidding me? Starfield was at the end of a major war between two large organizations that were still kind of on the brink of war between one another. Where are Jimmy and Jax this year? Not a clue. Maybe they're in Pyro. Maybe they're in Nyx. Maybe they're sipping mimosas on Toe Hill. I have no idea. But it wasn't peaceful. So the A1, that radar thing on the rooftop, was that ever a thing? I don't remember. There's 3 factions. There's 4 factions plus that we know so far, plus the Fire Rats, which is 5, plus the there's another group which is kind of like not renegades. They're vigilantes, which is 6. So we know of 6 different groups of factions specifically in Pyro, with possibly more on the way. BCCRE, before common Chris Roberts era, yeah. Not a question, I just think it would be fun if CIG added a number of dilapidated UGFs used by Pyrotechnic as a staging grounds for terraformation. The closer you get to the installation, the more plants you see, provide shelter between CMEs. I believe that's part of the plan, actually. If you looked at the derelict UGF images that they used in CitizenCon 2 years ago, and you look at the UGF kind of evolution into what we see as the distribution centers, I believe that's what we're going to see, is derelict distribution centers / UGFs, which were once owned by Pyrotechnic, which are going to be dotting all over various locations. They really did, like, bankrupt the shit out of Pyrotechnic. Pyrotechnic this was their last attempt at making it successful, and they fucking failed. They fell on their face really hard. With 5 Pyro jump points to significant systems connecting to Pyro, why hasn't the Navy cleared out the criminal activity yet? Seems like a huge problem to leave around. Most of them are smaller jump points, and a lot of it has to do with containment versus active engagement. Because to contain those outlaws, you'd have to go in, you'd have to clear out those areas, and then you'd have to stay there to prevent those outlaws from coming back, which is expensive, time-consuming, and of course risks your personnel in a system that nobody gives a shit about. So it makes a lot more sense to just park your assets that you have at the other ends of those jump points and prevent the people from, or prevent outlaw factions from coming out too much, which is generally what they've been doing. But of course, with Stanton's job was to protect itself. It wasn't supposed to need a lot of military or advocacy presence. But the different corporations of Stanton have, again, not gave a shit about protecting their own systems. So that's what led to Xenothreat. I believe one of the systems that it links to is Nyx, which is not a UEE system either. And then I gotta look up the other ones, but I think the other ones are also pretty minor ones. The only ones that it's connected to that are pretty major is Terra and Stanton. I think maybe Hadrian's, like 3 out of those 5. You got to remember that at the core, the UEE is broke as shit. So it has to rely a lot on civilian militias and local security, like local police forces, to deal with a lot of problems, and especially internally, because they're all hands on deck with the Van Duel. And often, like the most a system might get for protection is a single Idris. So 100 Marines and Starmen. That's it. With maybe like 1 major ship and two fighters. And that's the only UEE presence that exists in the system. That came up in Q&A. Turns out it's just rule of cool. Yeah. What did Helgen ask? So the radar... Oh, so the radar, yeah. It's just rule of cool. Greebles. So is there going to be Crusader C3 ship, which would be bigger than the C2? Possibly. Direct photogenic UGFs, Pyrotechnic. Calling it now, but Pyrotechnic lost tech. Possibly. Pyro is a place of primordial beauty where the earth meets fire and more fire. So in lore, Isn't that Stanton only has a single UEE Javelin station there, the Warhammer? Yes, on station INF, Imperial Naval, INS, Imperial Naval Station Jericho, which is the really only military presence. There are plenty of stations that have multiple naval stations or military stations. But yeah, there's just really not a lot. And we don't know if the Warhammer is always in Stanton. It probably isn't. So, but its main mooring base seems to be Jericho Station. So. So in lore, isn't the Stanton only? Yeah, I can see that you asked that. You just did that. Question: what future system do you look forward to the most? Hadrian. I would say Castra. I like because it's kind of cool, but Hadrian's real cool. So Hadrian has no terrestrial planets. It has only gas giants and ice giants. So there's no ways to land on, but it is filled with hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of derelict stations. Some of these stations are 300 years old and are abandoned military stations from when Hadrian was on the border of the Xi'an Empire, specifically to stop the Xi'an from invading. It was literally the wall of humanity, which is why it was called Hadrian. And so it's still dotted with hundreds of these little stations everywhere. And the main landing zone of Hadrian is called Keltu Reef, which is Keltu. I don't know if Major Star Stuff's here, so he can correct me or not this one or not. But Keltu or Kelto, I think it's Keltu. Keltu is the Banu word for reef. And so the founder of Keltu Reef was a young girl. I think she's like 7 years old when her mother sold her to the Banu. So she worked in a Banu Suli as a translator and to help with business for about 20 years. And then when she was able to purchase her freedom, she went back to doing trading. But she always kept her connections with the various Banu Suli, kind of still knows Banu, kind of stuff like that. And she was fascinated with the concept of Banu flotillas, which is where Banu will get together with a bunch of different merchantmen and different other ships, and they'll create a floating station where people could dock and then kind of do business with the different Sulis. And she called them reefs because when she grew up on a Nemo, which is an ocean world, where she saw they looked very much like the kind of coral reefs that were around there. And it might have been not Nemo, it might have been Ulysses. It's one of the kind of ocean worlds. So she decided to buy a bunch of these stations, these old derelict stations, and then tow them together and connect them together, and created a human version of a Banu flotilla. And she called it Keltu, or Keltu, which means reef, as Keltu Station, which eventually became Keltu. Some people call it Keltu, some people call it Reef, because its name is translated as Reefs, and so it eventually became Keltu Reef. So that's the kind of lore behind it. It's the landing zone of Hadrian, and it's not too far away. It's connected to Terra, and I think connected to Nyx. So it's one of those cool ones, and it doesn't require any landing zones, no planets, no like landing zones, just derelict stations, which is cool. We're doing Origin tomorrow because we're kind of a day behind on a lot of these. So we just did Tumbril and Crusader, which was due on a Sunday, and I'm going to be doing Origin tomorrow, even though it's the second day because they work for about 2 days. And then on, because tomorrow's Drake Day, and then on the day that I would normally do Drake, I'm going to do Drake and the various different manufacturers to kind of catch up. So my brain is filled with absolutely unimportant knowledge that affects nobody except for my ability to teach history and my ability to teach history, government, and economics, or various parts of lore from various different things I like. I am useless at everything else. If you could design a ship, what would be the class and role? Crusader, police ship. A ship that's the size of maybe a little bit bigger than a hammerhead, around like between a hammerhead and an 890 jump, which is able to store a single Avenger stalker. Has prisons, like holding cells, and lots of like little kind of areas for like prison pods, a small living quarters, or an office for like doing paperwork, and some light guns, but mostly like a floating police station, which could also be used as kind of like a, for those of you who are fans, like a Cowboy Bebop, like the Bebop kind of thing. So, but made by Crusader. Question, any stories about AIs that got away, disappeared, never again, possibly still out there? None that I've seen directly, but there is one, which is the Artemis. The Artemis was the ship that was the first attempt for humanity to send out a generation, or not a generation, it was going to take hundreds of years, about 250 years for it to reach the closest star system it was shooting for at its speeds. And I guess there was possibly a habitable planet in that area. And it was run by Janus, which was an AI that controlled the ship. And all the other humans were in cryogenic stasis. That lost contact once it left the Sol system, and we never heard about it. This is before we discovered jump drives and jump points. So that's still out there somewhere. Question, will there eventually be a physical book or book series for Star Citizen lore? They did sell the Star Citizen novella on the website for a while, but we don't know if it's going to be out anytime soon. CIG would be a fool not to hire writers to do the amount of lore, to like kind of fill out the amount of lore they have. Though I think that's a question that's something they'll deal with when they get closer to beta, when the game's more in a finalized state, when they know they're not going to have to completely break the lore of certain places. The name of that ship, we've come up with a bunch of different ones for different ones. I think, I forgot there's a couple of cool ones that people came up with for with deities or mythical creatures, like the Odysseus or something like that. Flying police station, jail / sheriff's office. Yeah, I think people would use it for various different things too, because you could use it with a small ship. You could use it for exploring. You still have those, prison pods, but like you use it for exploring. What's Dragon on? I don't know what Dragon's talking about. I'm just gonna ignore them for now. Will there be a prison pod for the Endeavor? I mean, it's the Endeavor, so maybe. Make it modular, have a cop variant? It could be. Cilia would be named from Greek mythos. Crusader ship should be named after Crusaders, Crusade stuff. Medical ship called the Hospitaller. Police ship called the Templar. I could see the Templar. Templar would be a good name. Is there a lore about the first galactic airline travels and how they affected the world universe with tourism? Not yet. There are some light hints at those sorts of things, but really the first about 200 years of human exploration beyond Sol was very rare. The settlers who left Sol to go settle other star systems, including Croshaw, Redder, Null, Nemo, the first systems we ran into, they were really taking a leap in the dark. It was they had no idea, very little idea what there was awaiting them, and a lot of times they made a bad gamble and were able to kind of make up their losses and had to go back home. As a result, it was very niche. It was very difficult to convince people to leave. But we do know that there was active travel and passenger travel between the various planets of Sol before the discovery of the first jump point. So pretty active trade between the various nations of Earth, the various nations of Mars, and the outer planets and such. There were stations as far out as Saturn, which were accepting people. The Gift for Baba is a long series. It was a morality tale, which took place like in the 26th century, or 24th century, or 25th century, but it mostly takes place in Sol. It's about 3 kids from Mars going to visit their grandmother on Jupiter, Europa, I think, maybe Ganymede. They're going to go visit their grandmother who lived on one of the moons of Jupiter. So it's actually what the names of the Crusader moons are named after: Daymar, Yela, and Selen, with the 3 kids. Was Venus ever terraformed? No. Humanity has a lot of difficulty with Venusian type planets. They call them smog planets. And they've tried many times to terraform Venusian type planets, but were unable to. They have easier times with Martian and semi-Earth type planets because they can. It's easier for them to build what they call atmospheric processors. We actually see an atmospheric processor in the Squadron 42 trailer. If you watch the Held the Line trailer, you'll see Old Man talk about these atmo processors. Those giant like spider or like spike type things. Those are atmo processors, which are designed to completely suck in and distribute like the right atmosphere back into the planet. Gonna play around the Carnival update for Dark Tide at some point. I just need more time in the day. Hires a lot of factions. Just make them buddies and agree on to run supplies for them. Oh, you're talking about yeah. Carracks are modular? Yes, Carracks are modular because those little drop-down cargo bays are actually modular. Do you think we're anywhere near intractable alien entities in Star Citizen, even if Hollow calls or interactable with Benu's Mission Giver? Yeah, I would say within the next 2 years. CIG has worked on some aspects of the Jean for in-game work. And we know also, of course, the Vandul will probably be fightable. We'll definitely run into them in some way, shape, or form after Squad 42 is released, which should be in the next couple of years. So probably by 2024 would be when I guess we start seeing them. But we know that, like, specifically the the Vandul and the Jean have been worked on. Still upset the Endeavor Master Set only came with a set of biodomes, with one set of biodomes. Don't buy the Master Set, just buy the base. You buy the stuff in game. It's cool to see more modular concepts for Endeavor and Galaxy, etc. I think they want to make those ships first before they actually get more modules. I think they really want to see how modules do and how modules sell before they do that. Is Sol the only real-life Sol system in Star Citizen universe? Yes. None of the other star systems are based off of actual star systems. So, like, Vega is not actually Vega. Orion isn't actually Orion. They're just named that. So, because they wanted to have some freedom to do whatever they wanted to with the systems rather than be one-to-one realistic. There's much less star systems in Star Citizen than there are in other games. There's only about 100. Humanity only has about 34 star systems in the UAE alone. but there's plenty of other kind of unclaimed, about like 20 unclaimed systems, and the rest are all alien of some kind. Hadrian Star is pretty big, and most of it's, like I said, there's no landable planets. It's all gas giants and ice giants. I think there's 3. I know about Green Imperial. I know about Green Reaper's downfall at Grimhex times. But I'm not sure, when did those racing medics get their crazy pilots? When exactly Grimhex Racecourse was created? Let me look it up. They're created specifically. Actually, this is a jump point thing. I have to look it up. It's one I didn't do. It's Wildstar Racing was the one who made it. That's brand new lore. Like only in the last year or so there was it created. It was created for why do I have so many spirits? What the hell? I only have one, game. Why do I have 2 sets of paints? All right, subscribers. Point. That was literally from August of 2023. Be able to give you some answers real quick. We'll probably know more about that specifically soon too, because that's in one of the brochures. I'm looking through some of this. I'm trying to see if they have anything about Grimhex. So the answer is there's no specific mention of the various tracks, though we may get some more in the future. But they were almost certainly built by Wildstar Racing. Probably around 2930s. Wildstar Racing is kind of a independent group of people who were kind of like a Bush League racing team. F4 racing kind of idea. Bunch of friends getting around to do racing to kind of get up-and-comers a chance to do sort of things. Hopefully that helps. We'll know more probably again by this week. So. Oh, I realize I didn't answer the full question about the like transportation, like airline travels, and that doesn't seem to have really kicked off until after the First Tavaran War. So post First Tavaran War, when humanity was at its peak in terms of its expansion, that's when you start to see a lot of that sort of tourism and those sorts of things start to kick off, mimicking a lot of like the kind of world wars of humanity and on Earth. I would love to see an MSR variant that strips out the servers, scanning room, and trades a rec room for a galley of half its size, then shipped into a high-speed medevac ship intended for cargo ground-based operations and ambulances. Listen, it's probably my favorite ship, but it's designed like garbage. The MSR is designed for, like, it's the victim of early Crusader design language, and it sucks. As Execute likes to say, it's built on stilts. The problem is it's got this really cool, unique, like air duct design that has absolutely no purpose in game. There's no purpose of having it. It just is there. It needs to be removed, and they need to kind of redesign that interior. It's just bad. And it's understandable. It's the first time they ever did something like that, and they were experimenting with it. But it needs another entrance for the kind of ship it is, and it definitely needs that whole bottom section to be changed around. It's cool as fuck design. Like, I like the asymmetric kind of the gaming mouse design for it. I do like the whole aesthetic of it being like a Millennium Falcon, but I don't mind if it's fat. It just needs to have purpose. Hey, Luna Maria. I thought the Storm IAE was going to be part of the regular Storm. For a moment, I thought it would be a surprise modular release. I don't think it's going to be modular, but I'm almost certain that we'll see different variants of it. I don't think it really needs to be super maneuverable. It just needs to be very fast. Smuggling works. It does work. It's just not really. It's just illegal. It's just legal cargo hauling. That's what it is. But like the MSR is not a good smuggler. The best smuggler in game is the 315p. Like, not even joking. It's the best smuggler in game. There's just no risk to it other than getting shot by players. Yeah, so the MSR is one of those things that it's obviously was designed with to be used like a I got into talking and now I'm probably running way over. Yeah, I should probably end here shortly. But it's one of those things where it was designed specifically as a kind of a look of Crusader, kind of really getting the look of Crusader down. And for that, I think it nails the exterior look. It's just the interior design layout is a little rough. The Hercules also has a similar problem with its internal design layout, but I think it makes a little bit more sense. It's a little bit more sensible where it has this big open area in the top because those are also storage space. So, don't you think the fixed tractor beam is a little awkward for solo smuggling in a 315p? The tractor beam doesn't really matter for the for smuggling. The thing that makes the 315p good at smuggling is that it's got a 12 SEU cargo bay. It's fast as fuckboy, and it's got a small signature and a small frame, so it can fit into almost everything. It can land it almost anywhere, and you can make it smaller signature with its stealth components. The tractor beam just makes it more utility. It can move stuff around if you need to. That's about it. That's all it needs. But as a result, like anything that's actually smuggling doesn't matter. All of the, like the MSR, which is supposed to be the smuggling ship, doesn't have any fucking purpose right now. No problem, Nightingale. Thank you for watching. Is Odyssey part of an Endeavor? I believe that the Odyssey. I don't think they're part, but I do believe that the front of the Odyssey and the front of the Endeavor are probably the same ship, but slightly changed. Because the Odyssey is newer than the Endeavor, so I think they probably took the same frame of the shuttle cab, the front area of the Endeavor, and then modified it to fit the Odyssey. That would be my guess. For those who don't know, the Endeavor actually has a front section which is completely removable. So it's fully like that. I think the 315p will probably get an upgrade with some kind of gimbal attached to it to make it a little bit better. It should at least be able to load stuff onto its own cargo bay. Downside of 315 is no paints. The 315P has all of the same paints as the 300 series does. Question, do you think the Vanguards will get a rework? Do you think they need one? People say, like, so due to heavy fighters starting to come out. I say it's fine. What's your take? I think it's okay. I think the only rework it would need is an external rework to be able to fit all of the different variants, so you could actually swap them out for modules, like they were intended to originally. Though they've kind of wishy-washed if they're going to do that or not. It's fine, because I think the major difference between the Scorpius and the Vanguard is the Scorpius does not have the range of a Vanguard. The Vanguard can just cruise, baby. So in a place like Pyro, which is much bigger and will have much less support everywhere, you're going to be able to go anywhere you want to. It's an exploration ship that is years away, so who knows? Exactly. It's not coming out in the next 2 years. Will the Freelancer get a VTOL back? The Max has a nice butt. Like the adjusting, like engines? Probably not. The cockpit of the Caterpillar is supposed to separate. It is. Do you think its Storm is priced light? None of the ground vehicles are priced properly. Because, like, if you compare the Storm, which is like $80, $90 base, that's the same as a Nomad. There's not nearly enough utility out of those ships, those vehicles, as there is a Nomad. So. Vanguards have more DPS and whole HP. They do. And they'll probably have more armor. The downside of the Vanguards is they don't have variety. It's very difficult to... they don't have a lot of, like, the front nose guns are very limited in terms of their total amount. I didn't see Captain Skyrider rating me. Thank you so much for Captain for an hour ago. I haven't been turning any of my alerts on, so I didn't know what was going on. Isn't the Arrow $90? Yeah, I think the Gladius is too, so it's around the same price. The Arrow is $75, so it's even cheaper. Yeah. So you could get, for the price of one Storm, you could get an Arrow and a skin for an Arrow. It's a proper thing to count everything in Nova tanks to understand how prices should really be like. Yeah, so I mean, like the real answer is, as we always like to say in the Info Runners, if you're buying a ground vehicle, you're paying to support the project. You're not really getting your money's worth at all. You're paying because you want to see CIG either make more of that idea, or that you want to just support the project. That's it. Question, in a universe full of spaceships, why are ground vehicles universally weak against air threats? Wouldn't Tumbril, knowing this, have better elevation on turrets, missiles, countermeasures, etc.? They should. CIG's just poorly designed a lot of that. It's also a video game, so there's going to definitely build in some weaknesses specifically so that it requires other protection. So, like, the Storm AA is a very good defense against ships, but it's, you know, missile-based, so. you think the crew requirements are set right on the stat page on the engineering demoed at CitizenCon? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do not believe that we call them, for those of you who don't know, we call the page, the stat page on CIG's website, it has been known colloquially by the community as the matrix of lies, because it's almost always wrong, out of date information. Rarely is it up to date, and I doubt that any of that crew capacity has the idea of engineering in mind, because engineering as a concept wasn't solidified until 2 years ago. So we didn't even know like the types of engineering there was. We just knew vaguely there was engineering. Any lore about water, underwater, swimming, etc. in Star Citizen? Yes, people swim around in water and they go underwater and they swim. And water is a thing. I'm not a CIG developer, so I couldn't give you any official information about any of that stuff, about how long it's going to take. I know that they're working on swimming. They were working on swimming as a mechanic for Squadron, so. And Winkata, the SIP matrix is a bug. Yeah, they deliberately limited how the high tank can aim up. But you think the remote operated turret gun on the Storm should be able to have 100, like a dome approach to its fight? Yeah, this is another joke that my YouTube folks won't get, but I do stream pretty regularly on twitch.tv/theastropub and youtube.com/theastropub live. For just regular content. My AstroHistorian channel is mostly dedicated to lore. It's dedicated to lore for Star Citizen, but other games, I've done Starfield. I'll be doing some more Starfield. I plan in December of doing a big expose on the entire lore of the Titanfall universe. I'll be doing some more just lore that I think is cool and fits the sci-fi aesthetic. Which, you know, I always look for more games and those ideas out there as well. I've mostly been sticking to games because that's just what I know, but I can do some other things as well. Anything that's used specifically like gaming and like gameplay, I tend to do on my Astro Pub channel. So for those of you who don't know, I do a regular stream on the Astro Pub channel called The Office Hours, where I talk lore and news. We look at the ISC and a bunch of other stuff like that. And mostly news, though. The joke is that I've been around for so long streaming that a lot of those faces that end up in the office hours about like, at some point, they just disappear, and then they come back 3 months later being like, hey, Paul, the reason I've been gone for 3 months is that I wasn't able to go on to live streams because I got hired at CIG. The number of times I've heard that fucking statement is way high. Very, very high. To the point where, like, I swear to God, I know at least 100 people who work at CIG who watch my channel regularly. So the joke is that I'm just, if you're here watching me right now, there is a high chance that at some point you may be able to work at CIG if you want to. I don't know why. Any know if the best and show paint will stay if you melt the ships afterwards? As long as you don't apply them, yes. I don't think you can apply them anyways. Yes, but you have to make sure that you have the best and show paint in. Hey, it's good. Job at CIG is what I'm aiming for. Well, stick around, apparently. Apparently, I'm a good luck charm. Don't worry, Paul. They can't afford me. Thank God. Hey, if they need a CPO or payroll person, they can hit me up. They probably do. I love the name Boatloads of Dope. That's great. Nice, Jaybird. Paul, when I play for CIG, put on my resume, I watch Paul stream regularly. You can. I don't think it'll help you, but... I got confused and assumed somebody implied you were on payroll. If I'm on payroll, I haven't received a paycheck in a long time. That's not me, that's Salty Mike. Salty Mike is the one that's on payroll. I'm sorry, Mike, I had to do the joke. It's a dead meme. It's been killed, it's been brought to death, but it's still funny. That's cool though. I didn't know you worked as a CPO. That's awesome, actually. Hey, my favorite lore guy. Hey, VB Iron. Did I pay me in redeemers? And redeemers I don't like. They forcibly stick it in my account. You're counting by day. So you're kind of in your downslide of your day job then. So I know the accountants like CPAs really work picks up towards the end of the year. So I can say that they do give me stuff. I do have a bunch of ships that they give me that I use for giveaways. So I do thank them for that. Twerk 17. I love the name. Now I want a redeemer emoji for this channel. I might actually put it on, get someone to make a redeemer emoji so for all players so that everyone can have access to it. Only if I can also have a redeemer animated one that's a redeemer in a trash can on fire. Gamble pops in every so often. You were a city treasurer until a few weeks ago when they let you go. Oh, I mean, that's an accountant. Or that's a title. I did the books for an entire city. All right, y'all. I'm past the time I was meant to be streaming. Thank you all for hanging out with us and talking. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that little bell icon for being noticed. And if you enjoyed it, hit the like button. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Pacific. On Twitch, and then I go live on YouTube about an hour after that. And that's when we actually do sort of these things, so I can keep it sort of condensed for some of that stuff. And of course, check us out, twitch.tv/TheAstroPub. Follow us there. We'd love to have you come on live. So yeah, thank you again, and like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black. And remember, ex Historia ad Astra.